Okay, so we left last week's Shiur with the feeling, I think we all had the feeling, Anita and Faye both expressed the feeling, and so did I, that Shaul was given a bit of a harsh time, really. What was he to do? Shmuel was late. He knew that the right thing to do was to sacrifice before you go out to battle. He was told to wait for Shmuel. It seems to us that he waited as long as he could. Shmuel didn't show up, so he was caught between a rock and a hard place. What was he to do? Carry on waiting or take the initiative? If he carries on waiting, he could be accused of being an indecisive king. If he takes the initiative and doesn't wait any longer, then what happened was he was accused of not following instructions, not following God's instructions, not following the prophet's instructions. It was a difficult decision for him to make. And according to Shmuel, he made the wrong decision. Now, we may say that Shmuel's got a bit of vested interest here, because we know full well, don't we, that Shmuel didn't want a king in the first place. He has a bit of personal negiot because his children were not deemed fit to follow in his footsteps. But of course, we can't really say that, can we? Because we're talking about Shmuel and Navi. We're talking about the prophet, about whom it was said that he was as close to Moshe Rabbeinu as you could possibly get. God spoke to him, as it were, almost face to face. So it's difficult for us to make those comments about Shmuel, but that's how it seems on the surface, at least, with Shmuel, the human being, and Shaul is in a difficult position. And maybe, of course, that's why this whole story is said the way it's said, for us to understand that leaders are often put in difficult positions and they have to make a decision. Now, they don't always make the right decision. And it seems here, let's see, if we look at verse 13, I'll share the screen with you now. We're in chapter 13. Let me share the screen. You got the screen? Yeah. Yeah, okay. Well, let's just let Avril back in. So, verse 13. No, I think we'll go back a bit and we'll just remind ourselves of what Shaul's response was to why he did what he did. Shaul said, verse 9, bring near to me the burnt offering and the peace offering. And he offered up the burnt offering. And it was when he finished offering the burnt offering that, behold, Shmuel came. And Saul went out to greet him. And Shmuel said, what have you done? And Shaul said, and here comes his excuses. He gives 3 excuses. We very briefly touched on this at the end of last week. We're going to go into it in a bit more detail this week. Shaul said, for I saw that the people had scattered from me. In other words, his 3,000 troops had started to run away, and we'll see very shortly how many were left. The vast majority of them ran away. And you did not come at the appointed time of the days. You, Shmuel, were late. And the Philistines are gathered in Michmash. The Philistines are there ready to attack. So Shaul says, what was I meant to do? Everyone's running away. You hadn't shown up, and the enemy's breathing down my neck. And I said, now the Philistines will come down against me to Gilgal, and I've not yet made supplication before the Lord. And I forced myself and I offered up the burnt offering. So he says, I just had no choice. What was I meant to do? So in other words, he's making excuses. He blames 3 factors. He blames the fact that the people ran away. So it was the people's fault. If they hadn't run away, I could have waited a bit longer. He blames Shmuel. You didn't come on time. So you told me to wait 7 days. I waited 7 days. You were late. It's your fault. And the situation was urgent. The Philistines were breathing down my neck. So I made a decision. I didn't want to go to battle without doing the burnt offering. So I did the burnt offering, even though you told me that I should wait for you and you would do it. And Shmuel, that's where we got to, the three excuses. Now, what's interesting is that Shmuel does not address the three excuses specifically. He basically ignores the excuses. And Shmuel says to Shaul, you have done foolishly. You have not observed the commandment of the Lord your God, which he commanded you. For now, the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. So he goes straight into the punishment. He says to Shaul, you've done foolishly. He ignores completely Shaul's attempts at justification. And he says, you've done foolishly. You did not observe the commandment of Hashem. And had you done so, Hashem would have made your dynasty last forever. Now, Michael Leaf has got a confused look on his face when I said that. What's troubling you, Michael? You're quite right to be troubled. What's troubling you?
I was just wondering how somebody could have be in that position forever.
I think it means his family, his dynasty. It would have been instead of the Davidic dynasty, we would have been the Shaul dynasty. That's what it means.
Yehuda was promised this anyway.
Yes, that's the other issue, is that Yehuda was promised this, and many of the Mefarshim actually deal with that question, and it seems that there was a potential for a dual kingship here, one for David and one for Shaul, but Shaul lost his as a result of this episode, according to this chapter, and the next episode, which we'll read in the next chapter, which you'll all be familiar with. When we come to it, you'll recognize it, which is the story of Agag, which we read in the Haftarah of Parashat Zachor not yesterday, the Shabbat before, a week ago. Shmuel does not address Shaul's excuses. He just gives him the punishment. Had you behaved yourself properly, Hashem would have established your kingdom forever. Verse 14. But now your kingdom shall not continue. Hashem has sought for himself a man after his heart, and Hashem has appointed him to be a ruler over his people. For you have not kept that which the Lord commanded you. Now, if you look at the Hebrew, this translation is not great, really. Has anybody got an art scroll handy? Missing Leon's art scroll. What's it called? The Koren Tanakh of the land of Israel translates as follows. He says, you have acted foolishly, Shmuel said to Shaul. You have not kept the commandment that the Lord your God commanded you. Though the Lord would have established your dynasty over Israel forever, now your dynasty will not endure. The Lord will seek out a man after his own heart, and the Lord will charge him as ruler over his people, for you have not done what the Lord commanded you. Now that makes more sense, doesn't it? In the English, he's saying, Shmuel says to Shaul, Hashem, you would have been the king forever, but now it won't. Hashem will now, as a result of your transgression, will now seek out, future tense, a man after his own heart, and will appoint him to be ruler over his people. Now, to me, that makes more sense. Let's have a look at the Hebrew. The Hebrew says, Va'ata, and now, mamlachtecha, I'm over here in verse Yud Dalet, those of you who are following. Mamlachtecha, your kingdom, lo takum, will not endure, I think is okay, good translation. Bikesh Hashem lo. What tense is that? Bikesh.
Past.
It is in the past tense, that's correct. It's the past tense. So the translation on the screen is an accurate translation. The translation in the, you can't really see it because of the background there, but this book here, the Tanakh, the Koren Tanakh, which is a beautiful production, the translation is not accurate because it puts it into the future tense. Even though...
Safaria got the same translation as Art Scroll.
Okay, what does Art Scroll say?
And now your dynasty will not endure. The Lord will seek out a man after his own heart, and the Lord will appoint him ruler over his people, because you did not abide by the Lord commanded you.
Okay, so let's just go into the rest of the pasuk. Bikesh Hashem lo ish kilvavo. Hashem literally sought a man after his heart. Vayetzavehu, that's past tense as well. And he commanded him, lenagid alamo, to be a leader over his people. Ki lo shamata et asher tzivcha Hashem, because you did not keep that which Hashem commanded you. So both the Safaria and the Koren are not accurate translations. They have changed the translation to make it make more sense. Now, some of them are Mefarshim actually say no. It doesn't mean future tense. It means exactly what it says. It means past tense. What it means is Hashem sought out a man of his own heart, and then open brackets, and it turned out you were not him. And he commanded him to lead his people, brackets, in the way that I wanted you to, and it turns out that you were not that person. Because it turns out that you did not keep the commandments of Hashem. So what the Mefarshim want to say on this is as follows, that this is not a future prediction by Shmuel that says, sorry, Shaul, you've had it, there's going to be a new king, which is much clearer in the next chapter, which we'll see when Shaul again fails to do what he was told exactly. And actually, we see there that Shaul actually is dethroned at that point. It's clearer there. Here, what the Mefarshim want to say, and actually, I personally think that this is a better approach because of the past tense in the original Hebrew. That this is Shmuel saying to Shaul, you had the most tremendous potential. Remember, Shaul was a tall guy. Remember, he was head and shoulders taller than everybody else. That wasn't just physically. That was meant to be metaphorically as well. He was a humble guy. He was somebody who wasn't looking for the limelight. He was said to have all the characteristics that were necessary. So what Shmuel is saying here, he's lamenting the scenario that Shaul had the potential to be the everlasting king, to be the king whose family, whose dynasty would continue forever. And basically he blew it. And it's, to me, it's very reminiscent of the time in the first parasha of the Torah, in Parashat Bereshit, where we see Adam Harishon, and he's given the one mitzvah, which is he's given more than one mitzvah. He's given a mitzvah to look after the garden, etc. He's given one negative commandment not to transgress, which is not to eat from the Eitz Hadat, and he fails. And what happens then is, of course, he hides in the garden. You all know the story. And Hashem says a famous word. Hashem says to Adam Harishon, what does he say? He says, Ayeka, where are you? Ayeka, where are you? Now, that was not a geographical question. Hashem knew exactly where he was. He was hiding in the garden. The Mefarshim say that this Ayeka, where are you, was a metaphorical question, almost a rhetorical question of despair. Remember, Ayeka is spelt Aleph, Yud, Kaf, Hey, Ayeka, which also spells what? What else does it spell? Aleph, Yud,
Echa.
Eicha, Eicha, which of course means woe. How could it possibly be? Eicha obviously is a word which we recognize as being connected with lamentation, with sadness, with destruction, with negativity. And this word ayeka, of course, there's no vowels in the Sefer Torah. The Mefarshim all pick up on the fact that this word ayeka could be read eicha. So it's not just ayeka, where are you? It's also eicha. Eicha means how. We had it in the Megillah, almost exactly the same word. It was like a double word in the Megillah. Eichacha uchal. Esther says, eichacha uchal. How can it possibly be? How can I be in a situation like this? Eichacha uchal. Can't remember the next word, it's gone out of my head. But how can I possibly be in a situation like this where my people are going to be destroyed and I'm here in the palace? It's not possible. How could it be? Eicha. How could it be? We say, Eicha yashva vadad. How could it be that Jerusalem sits alone in solitude? Beginning of Megillat Eicha. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying to Adam Harishon, Eicha, Ayeka, where are you? Look at you. 5 minutes ago, you had the potential to live forever. You had the potential to be B'Tselem Elokim. You had the potential to be in the image of God. You were, as it were, a God, a type of God. V'ayeka, and where are you now? Eicha, how could this happen? How could this be? The great Adam HaRishon with that tremendous potential of being almost like a God. Remember, God made man in his own image, and yet he failed. Ayeka, where are you? Where are you now? Look at you. Where are you? You're cowering away. You're naked, hidden in the garden. You're ashamed. You failed. Eicha, how could that possibly happen? And in some ways, that is what Shmuel is saying to Shaul. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sought out for himself a man of his own heart. You, Shaul, could have been that man. You were that man, in fact. HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose you himself. Bikesh Hashem lo. Not as the Art Scroll and the Sefaria and the Koran say, he will choose somebody else and this is your punishment, you're finished. No, this is the tragedy. Shmuel expressing this tragedy to Shaul. Hashem sought you out. You were the one who he picked out. You were handpicked by Hashem. And he commanded you to lead his people. Ki lo shamarta et Hashem tzivcha Hashem, but you didn't do it. You failed. And where are you now? I'm sorry, but that's it. You're not the right man for the job. And this is the difference in the translation between the past tense, which is faithful to the Hebrew, and the future tense, which other Mefarshim, obviously these translations are not wrong, or they are wrong. They're wrong literally, but they are used in a way to express the opinions of some of the Mefarshim that say that this is Shmuel telling Shaul that Hashem's going to find somebody else, which of course he does, which is David. I personally prefer to be authentic in its translation for two reasons. One, because that's what it says, and there's a good explanation for why it says that. And secondly, it would make more sense to be in the future tense if at this point we then went on and found David. But we don't go and find David until much later, until after Shaul has messed up for a second time. So it doesn't really fit, to my mind, as well, putting this in the future tense, in addition to the problem that actually the word is not in the future tense. It would be Yavakesh, he will seek out, if it was in the future tense. So you can, you pays your money, you takes your choice. I personally prefer the accurate translation, and I think there's a good explanation for it. This is Shmuel being showing pathos, if you're out. He's being pathetic in the true sense of the word pathetic. This is really a real pathetic situation. Shaul could have been the everlasting king of Israel, and because he was not able to fulfill the commandment, he wasn't strong enough to wait, then it all came crashing down upon him. Now, before we go on, let's just see something here. I said to you before that Shmuel, who wrote Sefer Shmuel, does not address the excuses of Shaul at all. He just says, you've acted foolishly. You've not observed the commandment of the Lord your God. Now, you'd expect him, wouldn't you, to challenge his excuses? You'd at least expect him to say, well, I'm not buying that. That's not an excuse. You should have waited a bit longer or whatever. But he doesn't. Is there anybody got any suggestions as to why that might be, or in what way we can see through comparison that what Shmuel, who wrote this Sefer, thinks about this whole episode? I'm trying to phrase a question because I know the answer I want, and I probably haven't phrased the question as easy as I want.
I think he thinks it's not worth addressing. He's already like thrown him out with the, he's throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
He's blown it, basically. He's blown it.
And he feels like it's not worth even addressing him. Don't make excuses. It's like you just don't cut it. That's it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think there's at one level, I think that's right. He's saying, yeah, you've done foolishly. That was really stupid, Shaul. Sorry. I'm not buying any of those excuses. Any other suggestions? All right. Let's have a look at what the excuses were, and let's see what it reminds us of. So there are three parts to his excuses. We're in verse 11 here. Shmuel said, what have you done? Shaul said three excuses. The people have run away, you were late, and the Philistines are gathering against me. What does that remind you of a bit? Let's just get the hierarchy here. Shmuel is the Navi. Shmuel is the prophet. He is the one who communicates directly with God. Shaul is, in effect, the secondary leader. He's the king, but he is the secondary leader. We see that throughout the time when there was kings and prophets. So Shmuel and David, Nathan and David, Shmuel and Shaul. Shmuel is, as it were, higher up the pecking order than Shaul. Nathan is the one that tells David when David...
It reminds of Aaron.
It reminds you of?
Of Aaron. Aaron and Moses.
Yes, that's exactly what it reminds us of. Let's have a look at Shemot, chapter 32. You'll see this. It should be familiar to you. It's the story of the golden calf. What happened with the golden calf? Let's have a look. Verse 1 in chapter 32 of Shemot. When the people saw that Moshe was late in coming down from the mountain, there's your first comparison. Moshe is the primary leader. For Moshe, read Shmuel. And the people gathered against Aaron. Aaron was the secondary leader, second in command, as it were, in the pecking order to Moshe. For Aaron, read Shaul. Moshe is meant to come down. Aaron is left with a dilemma. He's not coming. So what does Aaron do? Aaron tries to play for time. We know that. And he says, take your gold off and all that lot. And he makes the molten calf, the golden calf. And what did they do? Verse 6, on the next day they arose early and offered up burnt offerings. Who offered up burnt offerings? Aaron offered up burnt offerings. For Aaron, read Shaul. Shaul is the secondary leader to Shmuel. Aaron is the secondary leader to Moshe. The primary leader, Moshe, has not turned up. The primary leader, Shmuel, has not turned up. Aaron offers up burnt offerings. Shaul offers up burnt offerings. Let's just go back to verse 1. The people gathered against Aaron. What do the Mefarshim say about that? Vayikahel ha'am al Aaron. The Mefarshim say, why did Aaron give in? Does anybody know why Aaron gave in? Why didn't he just say, hang on a minute, wait a bit longer, he'll be home soon?
Didn't they kill somebody? Wasn't somebody killed as a result? So there's the danger
Yes.
which compares.
Correct. Absolutely, Michael. Who was it that was killed? Anybody know? Cast your minds back to Thursday morning. And we read a piece of laning for Purim. The piece of laning for Purim is at the end of the parsha of Beshalach. Vayavo Amalek, and Amalek came, Veilachem Al Yisrael, or words to that effect, something like that. They made war with Israel, didn't they? And what happened in that war? What was the story that we read on Purim in the laning? Where was Moshe during this war? Where was Moshe during the war? Stanley? Yes, unmute and tell us.
He was standing with people looking at the battle and raising his hands.
Yes, he was at the top of the hill, Al Rosh HaGivah, and he had his hands up. And when his hands were up, Gavar Yisrael won. When his hands were down, Amalek were winning. So his hands became heavy. So what did they do? Two people were supporting his arms. And who were they?
Aaron and,
yes.
father of Joshua.
You go on, you're close. You're close.
Chor.
That's right. Aaron v'Chor. Aaron v'Chor. They were the two who were supporting Moshe's hands. V'Aaron v'Chor tamchu b'yadav. They were supporting his arms. Aaron and Chor. They were the two who, whilst busy, Yehoshua was busy doing the fighting. So over here, back on the screen, Vayikahel Amal Aaron, the Mefarshim say the people gathered against Aaron because Chor had already tried to stop them from doing this and had said, wait a minute, Moshe will be back soon, don't do anything stupid, blah, blah, blah. And they killed him. And there, where they gathered against Aaron, that means that they were ready to kill him. And that's why Aaron tried to play for time, because he knew that if it wasn't for, they'd already killed Chor and they were coming for him. So this was a threat, a mortal threat. Go back to our excuse, verse 11. Okay, you did not come at the appointed time of the days. That's the same as Moshe. The Philistines are gathered in Michmash. They've gathered against me. There's a mortal threat here to the people. They're going to attack. So there's just a second comparison. And of course, the other comparison is the fact that the people were gathering against Aaron. They wanted action, and these people, of course, have run away. They've voted with their feet. In our chapter here, I saw that the people had scattered from me. I've lost the people here. Lost the people. You haven't come, and there's a mortal danger. What the Shmuel, the prophet, is saying here is that he's not addressing the excuses directly, but what he is doing is by implication and by hint, he's comparing what Shaul did to the golden calf. And we know, don't we, that the episode of the golden calf was an episode which was considered to be the worst episode in the entirety of the 5 books of the Torah. The punishment was going to be tremendous until Moshe stepped in. So what Shmuel is saying by writing it in the way he's written it is he doesn't need to address it directly. He's making it very clear through literary comparison that the actions of Shaul are comparable to the actions of the golden calf. The golden calf was a manner of worshipping God, which was not correct. The people didn't really think that this golden calf had brought them out of Egypt, as they say. If you have a look at the pasuk, it will tell you, and it says here, look at verse 4 over here. Vayomru, and they said, Eile Elohecha Yisrael asher alucha me'eretz Mitzrayim. These are your gods, O Israel, who have brought you up from the land of Egypt. They weren't stupid. They knew that 5 minutes ago, this thing didn't exist. They saw it made before their very eyes. They weren't stupid. They weren't saying, oh, look, this is our God that brought us out of Egypt. They weren't saying that literally. What they were saying was that this represents the God that brought us out of Egypt. And they were sacrificing to what they felt was a representation of God, notwithstanding the fact that they'd already been told not to do that in the 10 Commandments. Don't make for me, lo taseh iti Elohei kesef Elohei zahav. No, the other way around. Elohei zahav Elohei chesed. Don't make me gods of gold and silver. They did it, but they didn't really think that this was a god. This was representative of God. They thought that they were sacrificing to God. So did Shaul, the same thing. Shaul thought that he was doing the right thing by sacrificing to God in our chapter. He didn't know what to do. So he said, verse 9, bring near to me the burnt offering and the peace offering, and he offered up the burnt offering. Problem was, he wasn't meant to do that. He was told not to do that, but to wait for Shmuel to come. So the comparisons to the episode of the golden calf are very, very strong indeed. You can't fail to see this. And Shaul also will have not failed to have seen it. And it becomes very clear when we look at it like that Shmuel did not need to address those excuses directly. We've all been there, haven't we? Either as parents or as children ourselves, when we've done something wrong or our kids have done something wrong, and the greatest punishment is just to give them that look, right? It works much better than screaming and shouting and telling them off. You give them the look, they know that they've upset you, they know that they've done wrong, and that's and I don't know about you, I've been there on both sides of the coin. It's a much more effective way of dealing with things than addressing things directly sometimes. So we see here that Shmuel is calm. He's not aggressive. He says to Shaul, "You had a great chance." Verse 13, you had this great chance. You were the one that Hashem sought out. And verse 14, you were the one that Hashem sought out. He expected you to be a man after his heart, and you've not lived up to expectations, and we're all very disappointed with you. And then what happens? We don't see any fanfare, we don't see nothing. Vayakom Shmuel, Shmuel arose, Vaya'al mina Gilgal Givat Binyamin. He went up from Gilgal to Givat Binyamin, and he left. He went back home. Givat Binyamin is also known as Givat Shaul. This is where Shmuel's base was. We've spoken about this before. Ramah, Givat Shaul, all that area, that central area. There's a map here. Hang on, I'll just find you the map. Here we go. This is a map that I'm going to use in a minute. There's Givat, there's Gilgal, there's Givat Shaul there. So he's left, he's gone back home to his hometowns, and he's left Shaul on his own. He's walked away, and we'll see a similar episode, or at least the beginning of a similar episode in the next chapter, when we read the story of the battle against Amalek of Agag that we read in the Haftorah on the Parashat Zachor. So he's left here, he's gone. Vayifkod Shaul et ha'am, and Shaul counted the people, hanimtzaim imo, ke shesh meot ish, about 600 men. Who can remember how many he had originally before they all ran away?
3,000.
Yes, Michael, 3,000. So 80% of them, is that right, have run away? Is that right? 3,000, 600 left. It's about a fifth. 600 into 3,000, a fifth, isn't it? So that's 20% left. 80% of his soldiers have deserted. Now, whatever battle plans he had with 3,000 soldiers are now in tatters because he's only got 600. You can't have the same plan of action with 3,000 soldiers as you can with 600. He's lost 80% of his troops. So what's he meant to do? And here we're going to see about the battle now. Verse 16. Shaul ve'Yonatan beno, and Jonathan his son, and Shaul and Jonathan his son, v'ha'am hanimtzaima, and those people who remained with him, Yoshvim begeva Binyamin. They were stationed in Geva. Plishtim chanu b'michmash, and the Plishtim were camped in Michmash. Let me go back to that map that I found for you. Is it that one? No, that one. There we go. Can you see that on the map on the screen? Yeah. Okay. So there's Gilgal, where we just had the story of the burnt offerings. Here is Giv'ah, where Shaul and Jonathan are stationed with their 600 men. And there is Michmash, where you have the Philistines. The other thing I just want to mention to you, you can see from this map that Giv'ah, or Giv'ah over here, is slightly southwest of Gilgal. And yet our Pasuk said, where is it? Vaya'al min ha-Gilgal Givat Binyamin. And he went up. Now, normally when we say he went up, we usually mean going north. He was actually going slightly southwest. But I think it's a it's a bit like when you say, Londoners always say, when are you coming up to London? And when you go to Oxford and Cambridge, you go up to Oxford and Cambridge, even if you're coming from the north. There's two reasons.
Wasn't he going up in the sense of height? Wouldn't Jericho, or to the right of Jericho, be in the valley, and whereas the other place was actually in a more mountainous region?
Oh yeah, it could be. Yeah, that's possibly true. Yeah, that's probably true. Gilgal is in a valley there. Could be, Michael. Yeah, I'll accept that. I was thinking of it more in a spiritual sense, as a way that he had gone up because now he's going back to his own area where Shmuel has his encounters with God, if you like. Although that doesn't really fit either, does it? Because Gilgal was where the Mishkan was. So your explanation is probably better than mine. Does anybody know why, by the way, why since I mentioned it, why the expression is to go up to Oxford and Cambridge, depending where, even though you may be coming from the north? Go on,
It's
Anita.
one of the top universities.
Say again, Michael.
One of the top universities. Therefore, you go up. You're raising your educational standards.
You're raising. That's right. You're raising your educational standards. It's the pinnacle. It's considered to be the pinnacle. That's right. The other reason, of course, is that they don't expect anybody from the north to actually get into Oxford or Cambridge, so it doesn't actually apply. Right. Where are we? Yeah. So let's go to the map here. So that's where they were. They were facing off against each other. Michmash is where the Philistines are. Giva is where Shaul and Jonathan and their 600 men are. So keep that picture in your mind. We'll go back to the Psukim. Verse 17. Vayetze hamashchit mimachane plishtim shlosha rashim. Hamashchit is an interesting word. Vayetze, you know what that means, and they went out. Who went out? Hamashchit. Now, he translates it here as the raiders. What is lahashchit in Hebrew? How does he translate it here, I wonder? Hamashchit. What is lahashchit? Anybody know? Faye? How would you, if somebody says that somebody's a mashchit?
It seems to have the root of shchita in it. I don't know if it's the same spelling.
No, shchita's with a tet, not a taf.
Okay.
L'shachet means to destroy. So a mashchit is a destroyer. Yes, Michael. You're muted. It's all right. Okay. So hamashchit is a destroyer. So these were people whose job it was to cause maximum damage. These were guerrillas with a U, not with an O. Guerrilla warfare. Hamashchit. You'd say hamashchit. This was guerrilla warfare. These were the translation in the Koran here is, and the sortie marched out of the Philistine camp. He says the raiders. I would have used an expression that gave us the idea that these were small groups of guerrilla warfare, as opposed to a big mass army. These were small groups whose job it was to go and do as much possible damage as possible. If you think about in the British Mandate times before the state, the Irgun Tzvai Le'umi, that was their tactics. They would be mashchitim. They would have tactics to have small groups to go out and cause as much damage to the British as possible, to encourage them to leave, as it were. So that's what that word comes from. Now, the interesting thing here is that Vayetzeh mashchit mimachane plishtim, they came out shlosha rashim, in 3 rashim. Rash comes from the word head, obviously. 3 directions, 3 companies, they describe it here. And in the translation in the Koran is 3 divisions. So basically there were 3 groups of these crack troops, these crack guerrilla soldiers, who came out in 3 different directions. Harosh echad yifneh el derech ofra. One division went to the road to Ephra, El Eretz Shu'al, telling you where that is. I'll show you the map in a minute. Another one went to a place called Bet Choron, or the road to Bet Choron, Derech. Varosh echad yifne derech hagvul hanishkaf al gei hatzvoim hamidbara. And another one went to look over the valley of Tzvoim into the desert. Now, if you have a look at the map over here, you can see these three areas. One is going north, Ophrah. Bet Choron is going west, and the other one, the third one, is going to the east. So they are, and they're all on roads. The road north, the road west, and the road east. Let's just have a look again at the words. Echad al derech Ophrah, on the way to Ophrah, the road to Ophrah. Echad derech Bet Choron, on the way to Bet Choron, that's the north. Ve'echad derech hagvul. So basically, they were controlling all of the major roads. So if you control the roads, then you control the whole area, because how are your troops going to approach? If you control the approaches to these places. So they sent out these three groups of people to basically control the entire area. The one area that they left uncovered, by the looks of it, was the south, which is where Shaul and Jonathan were, which is a bit strange. And you'll see that in a second, what happened. Now, what does this remind you of? This, I'll be very impressed if any of you get this. What does this three companies, this three sections that they sent out remind you of? Shane Phillips not here, our military expert. David, can you help us? What's it remind you of? Okay, chapter 11 of Shmuel Aleph. Have a look. Cast your minds back to the battle against Ammon. Remember the Yavesh Gilad. Remember the people who were going to have their ears cut off? Shaul scored a stunning victory. A stunning victory. Do you remember? And that's what sealed his reputation with the people. How did he do it? Verse 11. And it was on the morrow that Saul put the people into three contingents. Look at the Hebrew words. Vayasem Shaul et ha'am shlosha rashim. Exactly the same words. Vayavo b'toch ha'machaneh b'ashmot haboker. Remember, they came early in the morning. They marched all the way through the night, and they smote the Ammonites until the heat of the day. And it was that those remaining scattered, and no two of them remained together. By using this technique of a pincer of three different heads, as it were, it was a pincer attack. There we go with this. That's how Shaul himself had the victory against Ammon. Is it not ironic, therefore, that he suffers from a pincer attack now from the Philistines? He himself, who had used that tactic, has that tactic used against him, and that's where they came. They have this three-pronged attack with the mashchitim. Now we've still got a few more minutes, so I want to just go through the next few psukim, which 18, 19, 20, and 21 need to be in brackets, because it don't make sense where they are. Let's just miss them out. No, we can't really miss them out. No, we need to say them before we go on. Okay, so we're in brackets now. Verse 19. So we've got these three companies, these three groups of people who are controlling the area there of the Philistines. And we're about to have a battle between Shaul and the Philistines. But the Tanakh now tells us something really interesting. Verse 19. V'charash lo yimtza b'chol Eretz Yisrael. There was no blacksmith. There was no blacksmith to be found in all the land of Israel. Ki amru plishtim, because the Philistines said, Pen yaseh ha'ivrim cherev o chanit. In case the Hebrews make a sword or a spear. Now, what's all that about? Anybody know what we're talking about here?
You sent us the information anyway.
Okay, well, there you go. I'm showing whether you read it, Michael. So the situation was that this was just at the beginning of the Iron Age. Ironwork was just beginning at this time. We're talking about the 11th, 12th century BCE, the beginning of the Iron Age. Turns out that the Plishtim, the Philistines, were in fact the experts in ironmongery and smithing, whatever the word is. Michael can tell me later what the word is. They were the ones that knew how, they had the expertise in making iron, metal, weapons and tools. So it says that the Philistines, who were the enemies of the Hebrews, they didn't allow any of the Hebrews, the Yisraelim, the Ivriim, to be a smith. In other words, it was a controlled occupation. The Jews were not allowed to be blacksmiths because if they were, they would make weapons. Or they plainly did not have the expertise, that only the Philistines had the expertise. And they didn't teach the locals how to do it in case the Hebrews made a sword or a spear. Either way, it seems that the weaponry that the Hebrew soldiers had was far inferior to the weaponry that the Philistines had. And look at this. This is really interesting. Verse 20, just to show you, to prove verse 19, Vayerdu kol Yisrael aplishtim. All of Israel went down to the land of the Philistines. Liltosh ish et macharashto. If you needed to sharpen your plowshare, okay, if you needed to sharpen your plowshare, there is a plowshare in case you want to know what a plowshare looks like. Okay, if you wanted to sharpen this thing, you had to go to the Plishtim because you didn't have either the expertise or the permission to do it yourself. Okay, if you wanted to sharpen your coulter, that is a coulter, in case you want to know what a coulter looks like. Okay, it's similar to a plowshare. But there you are, that's a coulter. If you want to sharpen your coulter, you had to go to the Plishtim. If you want to sharpen your axe, I haven't shown you a picture of an axe because I reckon you probably all know what an axe looks like. Or your mattock. Anybody know what a mattock is? Okay, I'll show you a mattock. There's a mattock. It's a pickaxe. What we would call a pickaxe today. That is a mattock. So don't say that you don't learn stuff when you learn Tanakh. You can even learn what all these old-fashioned instruments are. There's a mattock, there's a coulter, and there's a plowshare. And anyway, if you want to sharpen any of those things, and you're an Israelite living in the 12th century BCE, you have no choice but to go down to the Philistines to do so. Now, this is an interesting bit which we will end on. And this translation here does not do it justice at all. V'haita ha'ptzira pim le'macharoshet v'le'etim. And there was a file for the mattocks and for the coulters and for the three-pronged pitchforks and for the axes and to set the goad. Do you know what a goad is? Anybody know what a goad is? There you are. There's a goad. That is a goad. That actually is an ox goad. And of course, why is it called a goad? Because you goad the ox to come to you when you want it to come to you. You goad it you encourage it to do so. And there's a picture of it over here. There's a picture of goading the ox there. So back to the Pesukim. So there was this file, and then there's this word pim or fim here, pim. And it doesn't say in this translation here what the translation is in the other translations. The translation in this Koran says, the sharpening fee for plowshares, mattocks, three-pronged forks, three-pronged pitchforks, axes, or setting the goad was a pim. That was the fee. This word here, pim, it's not translated properly here. There was a fee you had to pay when you went down to the Philistine to have your tools sharpened. You had to pay a pim. Okay. Now I sent you a picture of a pim, and I shall show it you. There is a pim. Can you see that pim there on the screen? No, you can't see it. Okay, let me see if I can unshare and reshare. Maybe I can show you the pim. Can you see the pim now? Yes, there is a pim. And it's not very clear. I took a photograph of this. This is from the Koran Sefer that David bought for me. And I took a picture of it. I'll read you what it says. The pim that the Philistine blacksmiths would charge the Israelites for sharpening their tools is mentioned only here in the Tanakh. This is the only place in Tanakh where you see this word. How then can we know its weight was 2/3 of a shekel? The meaning of the word pim was revealed in the early 20th century, only 100 years ago. Until then, we didn't know what a pim was. In the early 20th century, when in archaeological digs at Lachish, where the Teal went to the other day, and elsewhere, such 2/3 of a shekel weights began to be found, and they were marked pim. You can see there's some markings on this thing here, and that apparently says pim in old-fashioned writing. Subsequently, scholars realized that the word had entered Semitic languages via Sumerian. This is a pim weight in limestone found in Arad in the 7th century BCE, a couple of hundred years later than our story. But a pim was 2/3 of a shekel. Now, that is a lot of money to sharpen an item of tools. If you had to go and sharpen your tools and you had to pay a pim, that's a lot of money. 2/3 of a shekel is a lot of money. So, of course, supply and demand, isn't it? If you are the Philistines and you have a monopoly on sharpening tools, and all the Hebrews had to go to the Philistines to have their tools sharpened, as we can see in the Tanakh over here, okay, and all of Israel went down to the land of the Philistines to sharpen each man his plowshare, then you can charge whatever you like. So they could charge a pim. And that's why it's telling you here. This is not translated properly. What it should say is there was a fee, and it was a pim, 2/3 of a shekel for sharpening these things. And why is it telling you this? Why is that in brackets? Now we come to the reason why those brackets are there, those verses 19, 20, and 21. Because of the fact that there were no smiths in Israel, and because the Philistines had a monopoly on working with ironware, and because they used that monopoly to overcharge people, verse 22, on the day of war, Nobody had any weapons. Neither sword nor spear was found in the possession of all the people who were with Saul and with Jonathan. Nobody had them. But Saul and Jonathan had them because they were the king and the crown prince. They were the only ones who had decent weapons. Vayetze matzav Plishtim el ma'avar Michmash. And the Plishtim went out to the other side of Michmash, meaning this southern side here towards Saul and Jonathan. And that is the end of our chapter. We're there left with a cliffhanger. What's going to happen? The Plishtim are about to attack Shaul and Jonathan. 80% of their soldiers have run away. They've got no weapons. They've not got anything. There's not a sword or a spear amongst them apart from the king and the crown prince. And the Plishtim are bearing down on them. There's no escape. They can't escape to the west. They can't escape to the north. And they can't escape to the east because the Plishtim are controlling the roads in all three directions. And it looks pretty dire. And that is where we will leave this exciting episode of Shmuel Aleph. Any questions on today's shiur? Let's just recap before we have the questions. What did we say? We said Shaul made some lame excuses, although we didn't really think they were lame. He was stuck between a rock and a hard place. Shmuel did not address the excuses, but he made very clear reference that we're dealing with a golden calf situation. Shaul is told he's blown it. He had the potential to be an everlasting king, and now he's not. Shmuel just got up and left them. Shaul's left on his own. The Philistines have sent out raiders, they've sent out guerrillas. They're controlling the roads, and we're told in brackets that the Hebrews have got no weapons because the Plishtim have control of the ironworks and the sharpening of tools at that time in history. And the Philistines are now ready for battle. That's what we've done today. Any questions?
Is the pim a weight, or is the pim actually something that makes up the pim at all, like in wheat or something or other?
I think it must be a weight because it doesn't look silver, does it? So,
well, if it's a weight, then how much did they have to pay for it? Pim is only a weight.
Remember, a shekel was a weight. The original shekel was a weight of silver. So
are you saying it's silver, really?
I'm saying it's equivalent of silver. Yeah, it's the equivalent of 2/3 of a shekel. So it's a bit like today. You've got a 50 shekel note, right? It's a piece of paper. It's not worth anything, that piece of paper, but it is because it has the value. You can trade that piece of paper for 50 shekels.
So are you saying the pim is a weight that you can trade, or the pim is something you put the pim on the scale and you have to put silver or something else on the other side of the scale to pay for it?
I think possibly both, one or the other, or both are possibilities. What does it say? It's saying in here, the pim that the Philistine blacksmiths would charge the Israelites, showing the source is mentioned only here. It was 2/3. Its weight was 2/3 of a shekel. So I think that you would, if you wanted to have one of these pims in your pocket, you'd have to go to the bank and give them 2/3 of a shekel of silver and get one of those. I think it was a form of early coinage. That's how I read it. Philip never turned up today, so he couldn't answer the questions that he promised to answer, but I did his homework for him. And I asked him to do the homework of what was the Philistine population of Israel in 1000 BCE, because I was concerned about the fact that there were 30,000 chariots, remember? And according to Wikipedia, I don't know whether you can rely on it, but according to Wikipedia, the Philistine population, can you see my screen at the moment with Wikipedia on? It's a bit small. I'll just read it to you. Population. The population of the area associated with Philistines is estimated to have been around 25,000 in the 12th century BC, rising to a peak of 30,000 in the 11th century BC, okay, which is where we're holding. So if the whole population of the Philistines, according to Wikipedia, and by the way, that reference 116, in case you're interested, is Yasur Landau, 2010, who says the number of Aegean migrants that reached Philistia in the 12th century cannot be established, yet something can be said about the scale of migration. According to calculations of the inhabited area, the population of Philistia after the arrival of the migrants numbered about 25,000 in the 12th century, reaching a peak of 30,000 in the 11th century, etc. So research seems to think 25, 30,000. So therefore, it cannot be, can it, that there were 30,000 chariots? And that is more evidence for my theory that these numbers are not to be taken literally. So that was the homework that I asked Philip to do, and I did it for him. There you go. Any questions? Okay, in that case, I shall bid you a Shavua Tov, and we will start thinking about Pesach, I think, soon. We may take a break from Shmuel Aleph, or we may not. If I can find enough time to do Pesach Shiurim as well, then we may not take a break, but we may. So I shall have to look at the diary.